The tales we have today are extremely interesting, as you will see. There are encounters on roads with creatures that seem to have no logical explanation, meetings with witches, and even those phenomena that have happened to people who are sure are connected to listening to this program. Now it's time to begin with the first tale of the night. I'm about to tell you happened to my husband Fernando when he was coming home from the airport. He asked me to share this story with you. It was a night when he was leaving the Mexico City airport, heading towards Tlalnepantla. He decided to take a lonely bypass road, which would allow him to get home faster. He wanted to get through it as quickly as possible, as he understood that such a remote, isolated place could be dangerous at that hour of the night. So he was driving at high speed, with no other cars around, just an endless expanse of grass as far as the eye could see in the total darkness. At least that's what he thought. Suddenly, something crossed the road right in front of his vehicle. It was so fast that he couldn't believe what he saw. Some kind of enormous, hairless, dog-like creature. Its skin was a grayish color, and it had no eyes, no ears, no mouth on its face. But there it was, standing in the middle of the road, directly in his path. Fernando felt a thud on the bumper. He braked, unable to avoid hitting it. He felt the creature under the car as the tires passed over it. Terrified by what he had seen, Fernando waited a few seconds to calm down, then slowly backed up. He went back to the spot where he had hit the creature but found no trace of it. No blood, no remains, nothing. There were no other vehicles around, so he took the opportunity to illuminate the area around him with the high beams. But there was no sign of life, nothing. Shaken by the experience, he got out of the car. The bumper was completely destroyed. The impact had clearly been real. He managed to detach the hanging pieces so he could continue on his way. But he couldn't stop wondering what that thing was, what it was doing there in the middle of the night, and where it had gone after he hit it at that speed. There should have been some evidence, but there was nothing. When he told me this story once he was home, I told him that I believed it was something that was trying to make him lose control, to cause him harm, to take him that night in an accident. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a nahual. I've heard in Relatos de la Noche tales about witches who can shapeshift into animal form. Perhaps that's what he saw, reverting back to its human form as it disappeared into the darkness. I asked him to let the community share their thoughts on what he might have encountered out there on that lonely road that night. What do you all think? You all. Good evening. The next story is something that happened to my cousin and some of her co-workers. She actually didn't tell the story much. It was my aunt, her mother, who filled us in. This occurred in the state of Puebla, to be more exact, in San Sebastian, Sinacatepec. My cousin is a police officer, and she was covering the graveyard shift, patrolling past 1 a.m. in a town near the straight stretch of Sinacatepec, right by the gas station, already quite far from the town center. That's when she received a radio report from her colleagues requesting backup, as a vehicle had been stolen, and they had seen it heading towards the straight stretch, past the gas station. My cousin and her partner told them they were nearby and on their way, and would report any updates. Several other patrol cars were also headed in that direction, but just as they were about to get on the highway, one of their tires suddenly blew out. They reported this, and were told that another unit would go directly there, while they changed the tire and then searched the dirt roads in the area, where the suspects might have gone to hide, even if they couldn't escape. That's what they did, changed the tire, and as they headed down the dirt road, they started hearing the other patrol cars approaching on the highway. They could still hear their superior officer on the radio, giving instructions, until suddenly there was silence. Then they heard him start shouting, terrified. He was no longer pursuing someone. He was the one being chased. He was yelling that whatever it was right behind them. All the officers in the town rushed towards that location, thinking their colleagues were under attack, perhaps ambushed by organized crime. No one knew how far they had ventured down that lonely road, how deep into the mountains they had gone. Their radio went dead, and they lost contact for a long time. My cousin and her partner completed their route and then returned to the meeting point, just steps away from the gas station. There they found their superior's patrol car, with its 2 occupants appearing to be in shock, being tended to by other officers. The rest of the officers, and even the gas station employees, were shining their flashlights into the brush, searching for something. One of the officers recounted what their superiors had said before losing communication. They had ventured down the road until any trace of the main highway and its lights were far behind them, at the limit of their own vehicle's illumination. Suddenly, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, the silhouette of an extremely tall man, dressed in black. As the light started to shine on him, a pair of red points appeared at eye level. It seemed those eyes were closer to them than the man himself. They felt fear, but continued approaching slowly, knowing they were chasing suspects. But when they were just a few meters away, that man raised his arms, if you can call it that, and in 2 leaps, he bounded off the road, vanishing into the darkness. One of the patrol's passengers swore he saw it take flight as it left the road. The driver quickly made a U-turn and floored it, trying to reach the main highway. That's when they used the radio to report what they had seen. But just as they were doing so, a deafening sound made the passenger look back. Those red eyes were approaching. That figure was coming after them at full speed on the road. The passenger started screaming at the driver to accelerate, that it was about to catch them. They say that thing would close in on the patrol car, then fall back, as if showing how easily it could overtake them if it wished. The road was treacherous, and the damaged patrol car was barely staying on the road, but the driver didn't care. He just wanted to get to the highway. Finally, they reached the main road, but were going so fast that they were losing control. Nerves, speed, the damage to the vehicle. It was a miracle they didn't collide head-on with a semi-truck that was also on the highway. A last-second maneuver by the truck driver avoided a devastating crash. Once at the gas station, they recounted everything to the workers there. The man in black, the red eyes, how it had chased them. The employees heard a sound from the brush again, as if whatever it was still nearby. So they sent everyone to search. But of course, they found nothing. My aunt believes that my cousin's late father must have somehow protected her that night, causing the tire to blow out so they wouldn't be the first ones to encounter that thing on that lonely road. Today I want to share with you and the entire community an experience I had on the outskirts of my town, near Guadalajara, Jalisco. Before reaching the town, about 30 minutes away, you can venture into the Cerro de las Ventanas, a mountain range with spectacular views, often used for long cycling routes. Although it's used less and less these days, as the area, like many other places in the country, has become quite unsafe. But it was there, on those routes, that this story begins, some 3 years ago. My group of cyclists from that time went to explore those landscapes. At one point I got ahead of the others. As a good cyclist, I had drunk a lot of water and needed to stop to use the restroom. I went quite far ahead of the others to do so. Before they caught up to me, I stepped off the route and started walking through the mountains. I reached a ravine with a beautiful view I didn't remember ever seeing before. I settled down behind a tree so my companions wouldn't see me when they caught up. As I was sitting there, I heard women's laughter in the distance. I thought it was normal, assuming the rest of the group was approaching, chatting or laughing. I even yelled out that I'd be with them in a moment, but I received no response. Then I heard voices again, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I realized these were not the voices of the women in my group. I then remembered something that had been mentioned on this program, that if you challenge the witches, they may accept that challenge and manifest. I don't know why, but with a bit of skepticism, I said out loud, though not loudly enough to be heard in the distance, "Witches don't exist, and if they do, let one appear to me." I finished what I was doing and prepared to return to the path. Just before reaching it, I found a very nice, shiny stone that caught my eye. Being a lover of nature, I decided to take it home with me. I put it in my bag, then saw the rest of the group approaching. The voices I had heard were clearly not theirs, but I brushed it off and rejoined them, continuing the route until we reached the town. Later, when I got home and was getting my keys, I realized I no longer had the stone I had picked up. I searched everywhere, in all the bags I had been carrying, but couldn't find it. I also noticed that my wallet was missing. In it, I had my ID and address. Obviously, I was concerned about what might happen if someone with bad intentions found it. I would have to cancel my cards, recover my ID, and do all of that as soon as possible. That night, as I prepared for bed, I went about my normal routine. But then I dreamed. Or perhaps it wasn't a dream, that I woke up in my room. In the corner, behind where my door closes, there was a crouching black mass. When this mass realized I was watching it, it started to rise up. As it stood fully upright, I could see what it was. A witch from a storybook, with her black clothing, long hair, and horns like a goat's, curved backwards, enormous. Her face was mostly covered by her hair, but I could see her greenish skin, her extremely long nose, and her eyes, which glowed green. Her clothing seemed to be full of moss, twigs, and dry leaves. She took a couple of steps towards me and began to laugh slowly, but it was the cackling laugh of a witch. It reminded me of my worst childhood fears, but also of the laughter I had heard in the forest. I was paralyzed with fear, and when she took a third step, it was as if I had woken up at that moment, sitting up in bed. And at that moment, I could no longer see her. Thank goodness I could no longer see her. I was sweating, with tears in my eyes. I turned on the lamp on my nightstand and scanned the room, every corner. I saw something on the floor, right where she had been standing moments before. A mask of a forest guardian. A mask I had made a couple of years ago that had been hanging in the same spot in my room, far from there. It was extremely strange, in fact impossible, that it had fallen and ended up in that corner of the room. In the confusion, I tried to get up from the bed to hang it back up. But before I could even throw the covers off, it was as if an enormous weight had suddenly fallen on me. I felt incredibly sleepy, out of nowhere. The bed seemed to be pulling me back in. I fell asleep, leaving that mask on the floor, with the lamp still on. In the morning, I told my mom about that dream, or that apparition. I also confessed what I had done in the mountains, those words I had dared to say out loud. She told me that she had heard a thud in the early morning when the mask had fallen. She said that when she woke up and checked, she thought she saw a shadow jumping from her balcony to the street. She told me that this was happening to me because I had been challenging things I didn't even understand. That day we lit incense throughout the house. When I went to bed, I lit a white candle in my room and put a glass of water and coarse salt under my bed, as they told me it was a possible protection against negative energies. I was able to sleep peacefully, and I learned this lesson, which I can now share with you. Please do not challenge the witches, much less when you are in their territories. Do not provoke energies that you do not know, and well, may God bless you.